We are now revealing the end of time, which it feels like right now.
We're waiting for the end of time.
I'm so not looking forward to talking about this episode.
It's not a good episode.
Okay, so I think, in terms of a send-off to the 10th Doctor, I think this is actually great. I think the scenes with him and Wilf are all brilliant. I think the way he basically chooses to sacrifice himself for Wilf, and the way the Fornox twist is executed, I think is actually really brilliantly done. Really powerful. A lot of people complain about the really long goodbyes and everything. I imagine we'll have disagreements over that. I thought, with the exception of the Martha and Mickey stuff, I thought that was actually well done. And the regeneration, I don't know how I feel about his final words in terms of giving him such a big send-off that would really, please his fans. I think it was really brilliantly done. Great music as well. The actual story of the end of time is complete
garbage.
Basically, anything to do with Ten and Wilf is on their own is brilliant. The regeneration is great. Very emotional. The actual story of the end of time, whether it's the guy who sets up a machine to make his daughter immortal, and he's given no motivation beyond that, complete blank slate. Anything to do with the Master is literally the most embarrassing stuff in the show. Stuff with the cactus people is kind of shoehorned in there too. The Return of the Time Lords is embarrassingly bad. It's the usual thing where they just sort of come in, they try to bring back Gallifrey for to knock Earth out of its orbit and replace it with something, then they just get sent back. Okay. Timothy Dalton is really also bad, by the way. He's really terrible in this. As much as I usually like him as an actor, he's not just because of the spitting every word. And it sucks.
That wraps it up right there. It sucks.
And in summation, boo.
I don't think anybody in this room is surprised about my own opinion of this. I decided to take notes this time because it's really long. I made massive Twitter threads, and most of it's just me complaining. I think this is a mess. I'm not going to go into my usual stuff. I think Nick would be happy to say I'm not going to bring up the recurring supposed subplot thing, because the Knock 4 Times thing, I agree with Rob, it's somewhat cleverly paid off, if only the rest of the setup for it wasn't a complete mess. I think it's one of those things where 3 different episodes prying for attention here. You have the Return of the Master, you have the Return of the Time Lords, you have the Doctor dealing with his own mortality. So like this episode, my thoughts are going to be a jumbled mess. The one thing I thought about going into the Ood and that whole setup for it is their society's advanced so rapidly since the last time I saw them. I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I wonder how this happened, why they can see through time. And it's not really explained or important at all. And there's a lot of weird floating plot threads throughout this, the same, like what Rob said, the guy and his really creepy relationship with his daughter and trying to make her immortal. The immortality machine itself has its own plot cul-de-sac involved with it. The cacti people, that's racist.
I will say that in Latin it is cacti, so you are officially the first person I've ever heard pronounce that correctly.
And I was completely by accident. It just feels like, because a lot of this felt like Russell T Davies had his finale in his final series and was just trying to rush whatever idea came into his head out there, and this is him going, I'm just going to go out with a bang, even if it doesn't make any sense, even if nothing I'm saying is remotely true line through any sort of random thread. I just really hate, because I don't even rate David Tennant that highly as a Doctor. I love him as an actor, but I've never was nearly that attached to his Doctor like a lot of other people did. I still think this wasn't a good send-off for him. I still think he deserved a lot better, especially for how big this era was for the show. This is more of a problem when the episode aired and how much people were so resistant to Matt Smith and so resistant to Moffat. I don't think this episode really helped, because it is caked in his miserly misery of an end of an era, and the Doctor being so mopey about nearing the end of this life when he's an immortal alien talking to a man in his 80s about the fact that his life is going to end when he has another one. There is stuff I like in this, mostly Bernard Cribbins, who is still probably one of the best things about RTD's era. I love Wilf. I pretty much, anytime Bernard Cribbins is on screen, I'm charmed by him. There's a great little scene where he's staring out into space, and it's one of those human moments. To sum up, I didn't really care for it. And it doesn't help that probably my favorite scene in it is Matt Smith's first scene that wasn't written by Russell T Davies. And it's also really totally distant from everything going on. Okay, I'm done. I've summed up.
To me, this and Fear Her are just the worst in the whole entire series in different ways. It's just a mess. I mean, I know everybody pretty much said everything there is to say. I think it's a bad send-off for David Tennant. I know I'm pretty hard on David Tennant, but I do like his doctor. I just think Russell T Davies writes him very arrogantly. It's just a big cluster. And the Master, I hate this Master. He's so embarrassing and cringeworthy every time he's on screen. I just hate it. Especially having to watch him eat up close, having to see it stuff in the teeth.
Fast motion too.
That's the best part of it.
Like reaction shots of Brianna going, ugh.
It's just very self-indulgent, and everyone always accuses like Moffat of being very self-indulgent, and sometimes I guess he can be, but this is the most self-indulgent stuff I've ever seen. Like Russell T Davies, I think, is the king of self-indulgence as far as the show goes.
Say what you want about Chibnall, actually, and I've got a lot of bad to say about Chibnall's run on the show, but I think he's probably the least self-indulgent showrunner.
Probably, except for maybe some of the Yaz stuff, but yeah, I mean, he has time, though. We'll see. Between this and like the last finale, the 4th-season finale, there's lots and lots of self-indulgence, and I hate that at the end we couldn't even give David Tennant his last word. He's like, I don't like that line, please take it out, and he still put it in there. It just feels kind of gross.
Oh boy, do I have things to say about that.
The original take of the line was actually 10 times worse.
Didn't they have like 5 takes all on a spectrum of like more miserable to less miserable? And
You were looking up on YouTube, they had like a bunch of different takes. One of them was just where he's a literal sobbing mess.
Yeah.
And it looks really bad. And David Tennant actually himself said, don't use that take at all, because it's just not true to the character.
And I hate the scene at the very end where he just basically throws a temper tantrum. Oh, God. It just makes the 10th Doctor look 10 times worse. It just makes him look so arrogant. So arrogant. I hate it because I do like this Doctor. I really do. I just hate that Russell T Davies has to put these little things to make him so arrogant and so elitist. And it just frustrates me. But anyway, it sucks.
This episode to me is like if the theater kid in your high school tried to direct an action movie. Everything about this episode is stained by it. Like the Master is, I think, maybe the worst character I've ever seen in any episode, including Love and Monsters and the Celine. I hate him so much, and I usually love John Sims' Master, but here I can't stand him. And the weirdest part for me is that this episode, this duology, is the first set of episodes I ever watched for this show. And I was like, wow, this is really weird. I kind of want to watch it. And then looking back on it now, I'm like, wow, this episode's really bad and does not fit in at all to the overall cosmology of the series that they were making. I hate the cactus people. I hate everything. Master turning himself into everybody. Every scene of that is awful. All the horrible green screen, the ridiculous acting from the extras, and the other John Simses is all awful. There's just one emo kid that's just like, oh, there's a voice in my head, and I'm like, that's the line read you went with? Really? That line read? Really? I checked out at about, I want to say 15 minutes into the first part, and I never checked back in. Not even the regeneration scene, which I'm looking back on it now, I actually hate. It's awful. Everything about it sucks. There's so much wrong with it. And I think it's because Russell T Davies mistook kind of bombast for writing quality. Whereas my personal favorite regeneration scene, which is the 11th Doctor's, is a lot more personal and intimate. This one's just I'm dying.
I just want to say, I know some people don't like the 11th last episode. I don't care how you feel about the episode. The regeneration scene was beautiful.
Oh yeah, no, the episode's the regeneration.
I hate Time of the Doctor, but I really love that final scene.
Yeah, and I expected to feel that way about Ten's regeneration in this episode. Did not do that at all for me. I love Wilf. Wilf is the only good thing in this episode. That's all I have to say. Goodbye.
I thought that was a pretty positive reaction.
I hate John Sims' version of the Master.
This wasn't my first episode. My first episode was Vampires of Venice. It
Oh
was
dear God.
the thing I ever saw of Doctor Who's generation. It's specifically everything from the I Don't Want to Go. And I was like,
I'm fairly certain that's also the first thing of 10 that I ever saw.
I was like, what? What is this? The man said he didn't want to die and then explode. What is this?
Me.
Hey, it got me into the show. Nick can attest I said this about 7 times during the episode. Wilf deserves better. Wilf is the best thing to ever happen. I love him. I love his little squad of old people.
Yeah.
Okay? I love that, like, and Graham is like, bus drivers know everything. And I'm like, look at all these old people on this bus. They're great. Old people in buses in Doctor Who. I love the moment of him looking out at space.
That whole scene from
and-
start to finish is perfection. Start with him looking down. He's like, my wife's buried down there. Do you think the Master changed everyone in their graves? And I'm like, oh my God.
When he learns how old the Doctor is, we must look like insects. To me, you look like giants. I love that. I love that. That's like all of the Doctor's character.
That's probably my favorite Russell T Davies line. And he's a really good dialogue writer. That's probably my favorite line of his. Probably in the entire show. It's to summarize the Doctor's relationship with human beings so utterly perfectly. Tennant plays it beautifully. I'm being positive. I have niggling things about the scene, but in general, overall, it's really well acted. It's really well shot, actually. It's one of the few times where the camera actually slows down and the pacing is allowed to breathe a little. And it feels very natural. And you really feel a connection between the two actors. I just really love Bernard Cribbins. He has a history with Doctor Who as well. He was in one of the Peter Cushing movies. And if you should listen to his song, Right Said Fred, which was the inspiration for the Right Said Fred band name. He's a really great comedian. He's just kind of a sweetheart, and I'll watch anything.
He's also terrific in that one Faulty Towers episode he's in.
Yeah, he's just kind of a British treasure, and it's wonderful to see him in this. And then he just feels like a proper companion, and he's one of my favorite things about the Russell T Davies era. Him and Donna.
This has been UK history with Dan and Rob.
We've all, at some point, been passengers on the Rose Hate train. For
Choo choo.
Yeah.
I do really love the fact that they decided that when he says the goodbye or whatever, it's actually before she meets him. And she's like, you're going to have a really great year, because it would have been way harder and way worse if they had tried to make another Sappy Rose goodbye. So I like that.
Yeah.
I love what he does with Jack. I also don't like Johnson's Master, but I like his hair. I think the weird hobo look fits him more. I don't think it fits the idea of the Master, but I think it fits him more.
It is a moment in the industrial park where at night where they're both talking and Sim is actually allowed to calm down a bit, and he's great in that moment. It makes me really feel bad that if they had allowed him to be a little more restrained, he probably would have been a much better Master than he ended up being.
I think it's
really
great in part 2 when they have that discussion about when the Doctor is saying, you know, you could be better than this, you could be beautiful, or whatever. I think that's a good scene between them. Otherwise, I think he's very, we'll get onto the negatives of him later, but there are points when he's not being written as a crazy lunatic in the vein of Anthony Ainley's Master, where he's like, he gets to show some good stuff there. We'll see a lot more of when he comes back in Series 10. In that story, he's actually written as he should have been the whole time.
That was great. He's great in that. So I know he can be good. Nick and I had a whole discussion about like the Master and how like the Doctor always feels like a constant carrot. Like no matter what version of the Doctor, it's always the Doctor. The Master kind of feels like different people. Like Delgado, Ainley, Jacoby, and Dewan feel like one person.
Eric Roberts.
They're all...
That's a discussion for another time.
It's a discussion for another day, but it's something that came up. Murray Gold.
Yeah, I was going to try and transition us onto that. The one thing that kind of goes, like, mostly unsaid, but is generally bound to be good in any episode is Murray Gold, and Murray Gold came to play.
I mean, Valet de Chem is an amazing track. Four Knocks is amazing. And just in general, the music throughout this, I think the usage of the music is terrific. Even though it's generally, a lot of it is just reused tracks from old episodes, but the original tracks, especially in this, are some of the best ever. They really hit hard, I think, in those regeneration scenes. The Four Knocks track was brought back in Time of the Doctor, wasn't it? You know the scene from when he's sacrificing himself, they bring it back in Time of the Doctor when Clara is reading the poem, if you remember what music I'm actually talking about.
I forgot that was the same track, honestly.
I really liked the reference to Donna's father. I think most people know this. The actor was actually supposed to, from Runaway Bride, Howard Atfield, was supposed to come back, and they actually shot his scenes with Partners in Crime with Donna. He unfortunately passed away before they had finished production. Because Bernard Cribbins had a cameo in Voyage of the Damned as this unrelated character, they just retconned him to be Donna's grandfather. Atfield scenes with him. That's why Bernard Cribbins became such a bigger part of the show. So it was really nice, the reference to him getting the lottery ticket.
A lot of dead actors that have like influenced Doctor Who's production.
It's sad that this man passed away, but like Wilf wouldn't have been the character otherwise. But yeah, it's a weird kind of thing. And that's why it's a reference to her father at the end of was for They reference his military history a lot. He was a paratrooper who was stationed during the partition of Israel and Palestine in the 50s. So they bring that up a couple of times. That's what the reference to the gun is. That Bernard Cribbins was actually in the army. And
he wasn't even acting there.
Again, this has been British history.
Yeah, I know a lot about Bernard Cribbins, apparently.
You got his Wikipedia page just on the tab, like right there. Just
he has it memorized, Rob. Come on.
In the goodbye scenes, I'm not sure how I feel about it being there in general. It feels a bit gratuitous, but again, no negatives. I really like that bit where he goes to the granddaughter of the woman from Family of Blood two-parter. One, it's just great to see Jessica Hines any point at any place. She's just a great actor. That's one of my favorite two-parters from the show, and it was just a really nice little moment between them.
There was a lot, just like the rest of you, I guess, that I didn't like about this episode, particularly the Master. We'll get into that later, but like suddenly he's Superman. Whatever. Honestly, pretty much everything that everyone said up until now are things that I really enjoyed about the episode. The whole send-off was so like ridiculously self-indulgent. There's no debating that. It's done so well. Like each little piece of it just hits completely right as it's happening. Like what they did with Rose, they could have had another sappy goodbye, but they didn't. What they did with the lottery ticket, each little bit just felt like something slotting into place, like you're tying up loose ends. And like there was no need to do that. He's just gonna be another doctor. Like, you know, you didn't have to do that. If you're gonna take the time to, I guess, wrap up this entire character, I feel like you did a really good job of it. Rolf, of course, is awesome. And his little band of old people. They were really down to clown. He was like, hey guys, do you want to help me with this thing? And like he explains what they have to do while they're on the bus. Like they got dressed, got ready, left their houses, met him on this bus, had no idea what this was for. He explained nothing. Cute.
Old people be knowing everyone and everything. If you want to track somebody down, you ask grandparents.
We call it the elder net.
Neighbors, cousins, teacher at the Y's son who went to high school with that person.
Before we had the internet, we had the elder net.
I do love that Russell T Davies never seems to know how massive London is.
Because he usually films in Cardiff.
He doesn't know how big space is either, but that's an entirely different discussion.
The old people are the new Scooby Gang.
Yes.
Mystery Incorporated.
And they are wonderfully, like, you know, Christmassy, very holiday. This whole episode, 2 episodes, I guess, this whole thing is, like, blown so out of proportion. But then you have, like, these little moments with, like, Wilf and the old people that are just so kind of down to earth and, like, goofy. It's cute. It's really homey and comfortable feeling, and I like that.
And like building on both the Wilf part and also like the overwhelming sort of bigness of the drama in this episode, there's this bit that like I never really picked up on before, but it's in the cafe, and like as Lucy mentioned, there's a lot of parts about that discussion that I don't care for and that we'll get into. There's this bit where the Doctor and Wilf are talking. This is where he's talking about like everything I am dies and stuff, and I have issues with
New
that.
Mango sauntering off.
Yeah, but like the Doctor almost breaks down in tears, and like he just stops himself in the middle of that conversation. And that's one of the few ways I feel like this story really builds well off of like where we left off in Waters of Mars and really what we've been building to with Ten's whole era. He's needed to just break down and cry for years, and he never let himself until this story happens. And it makes sense that it's the Master coming back. It's Gallifrey coming back. It's just the whole sense of bigness that this story has, where it's like, this is finally what breaks him down. And like, again, issues that we have with like the moment where he lets Wilf out of the machine aside, like that's a breakdown that this guy's needed to have since he showed up on this show, basically. Like, I have issues with it, but it does feel kind of cathartic when it happens.
A lot of people complain about that Ten talking about how he considers his regeneration like a death, and how it feels like a new man is going away with his life or something like that. I think it's more out of the context, like Dan said, of how it felt like it was devaluing the next Doctor. If you actually look at the text here in the story, I actually think it's actually really well written, because normally you don't really just consider the idea that the Doctor feels that way. You just get the idea that, oh yeah, he's just, you know, changing his face. But that's not what happens. When the Doctor regenerates, he's still the same person to an extent, but his personality undergoes some serious rewrites. It's like when Eccleston, he was regenerating, said he's terrified and he doesn't know what he's going to end up with. He could just come back with like no head.
I think some of that is the
it's like,
performance because David Tennant is so very dramatic in that scene and on the verge of crying the whole time.
I'm just saying that I do actually like it as a concept because it sort of lets you into the Doctor's head a bit, and it knew that your personality was sort of going to change and you don't know what you're going to end up with. You would be terrified. You wouldn't just be like, oh yeah, I'm fine with this. I'm fine with like just my whole personality sort of being rewritten apart from a few core bits. You know, I do think it is pretty realistic. I can see how that, as well as the whole "I don't want to go" line at the end, would have like really irritated people. I just think it does sort of make the Doctor seem more vulnerable, and I do quite like that, how it's presented. I think people will just keep arguing about that forever, really. But yeah, I'm personally the positive side on it.
Well, what you're discussing too is a death of personality. Like we haven't put a name on it necessarily, but it is a form of death, and I think like people kind of undercut that by saying like, oh, it's not like a bodily death, so it doesn't matter. Even if you're in a weird sci-fi situation like that, what he would be experiencing would be like the death of a version of himself, and that thing's never coming back, barring wacky regeneration, future hijinks, or time travel. The show is weird.
Especially as well, you have to consider the 10th Doctor in the timeline is actually like one of the shortest lived Doctors. You've got like Matt Smith's Doctor living for like 900 years. David Tennant's Doctor, he starts at like age 900, and when in the end, in this story, he calls himself 906.
Yeah, Rob, you're Brianna's new favorite.
Oh, thanks.
Since we were talking about regeneration, oh my God, Matt Smith just comes in on the ball. You never think of it as part of this episode, but no, they don't replay that clip during 11th Hours. He stole this episode, and just the absolute second, he just immediately knows, okay, this is what I'm doing with this character.
He wasn't like a fan of the show beforehand, but he did like watch Tomb of the Cybermen, and he immediately decided he wanted to just sort of not impersonate, but he was inspired by Patrick Troughton's portrayal in that story. So when he was coming in, he knew what character he wanted to play right from the beginning, really.
It's just great to see like the old clips of Russell T Davies and Stephen Moffat. You'd be like, where was this guy before? How did we not find him? Why are we auditioning other people? He's saying everything perfectly. Gives you a lot of levity in a way that doesn't feel jarring, especially when you think of just like how many people were against him being the Doctor. Because like, I guess in the age of Jodie Whittaker, where there was just an upheaval of stupid sexism, you kind of forget that Matt went through it.
But with ageism
this time.
He's 26.
As like the new Doctor on Doctor Who Confidential. And everyone's reaction was just like, who is this guy? He looks way too young. Can't imagine him as the Doctor at all. He looks stupid.
Doctor Who is ruined forever.
When he actually came in, a lot of people like sort of really changed their minds because of the way they decided to portray him as his personality a lot older than he actually looks.
Every time we get a new regeneration, they do the whole thing of like, who is this person? I've never seen them before. It's the same with Jodie Whittaker.
Jodie Whittaker, I think, was actually pretty well known.
No, that's what I meant. She had a really big filmography, and like they don't tend to get A-listers to play the Doctor outside of like the John Hurt. They don't tend to get like big, huge names. It's usually established character actors who've kind of made their way through the game.
Probably the most well-known actors going into playing the role were Peter Davison and Peter Capaldi. Eccleston was well known as well.
British theater, they're probably more well known. Like if you're a person who goes to theater in the 1970s a lot, then you probably know them.
I want to say I'm proud of us because we did in fact make a solid 20 minutes or more. My next thing is a positive that kind of transitions into a negative.
Let the whipping begin.
I noticed Brian has not got the chance to mention any positives.
I said before, every scene that Wilf's in is magic, but there are so many little individual good moments in this episode, and somehow they all turn into a collage of garbage together. Like I don't know what it is.
I wanted to mention the two workers at the burger van. They're talking about dome recession planting. The line is something to like, oh, we won't see any of that. And I like that. I like that. It's a nice subtle little jab, a really natural, class conscious kind of line to put in. And I really like that Russell puts in a lot of stuff like that. But then I'd have to mention the burger van scene, which is the worst scene in the entire episode.
Wait.
So
series,
We'll
the
get to
entire
it.
series.
The president of the United States, and then just getting a black guy who obviously doesn't look anything like Obama.
Until this point, with the tactic of having like fictional UK and US presidents, and then all of a sudden he's like, "Oh, okay, Obama, we'll just get some black guy, just put him there."
That Joss Whedon progressivism right there.
I really hate the actual scene, but I do like the get out of the way, and then he has the gun, and then they able to get out of the way. That's a really nice nod to like the Doctor and the Master's friendship, even though everything else in that scene is
Okay, right. I want to briefly walk back what I said about like any feelings I might have had toward the scene where he lets Wolf out of the radiation machine, because the more I think about it, the more I think that actually really works. And like I know what Lucy's talking about in terms of like it comes off really egotistical isn't the right word, but like really self-centered. Like he's literally throwing a tantrum.
It's very melodramatic.
Yeah, but like again, I think that works in the sense of like that's a thing that's needed to happen for a long time. And yeah, it's not good that he says that. And like the reaction that he has where he's like, oh yeah, of course this had to happen. Like the tantrum that he throws is not, the word I wouldn't use is justified. It's kind of a thing where it's like, okay, he was always gonna let Wolf out anyway. Like it was never a question that the Doctor was going to save Wolf's life. Just to let him have this moment where he gets to throw a tantrum and he gets to at least play at being a little selfish, and then he does the thing that he was always bound to do. For as much as I don't care for, as Diamanda Hagen calls it, the farewell parade of death, I can just imagine being someone watching this story as it aired and like getting like really warm fuzzy as he like says goodbye to Rose and like, oh, you're going to have a great year. And I think that was really well done.
You strange drunk man in the alley, I will.
Long coat and everything.
That both of those moments that work really well in a vacuum, or like even just as the ending to this story, are ruined by I Don't Want to Go. I Don't Want to Go sucks, and it totally wrecks both those moments. Like, the point of him throwing that tantrum before he lets Wilf out is like, okay, this is like the outburst of emotion that he needs and that you could debate he's pretty much earned before he like does what needs to be done. And he's like finally like, okay, I've been worried this whole story about regenerating. I've been trying to avoid it, but like, you know what? If it means saving this guy, then I'm gonna complain about it, but then I'm gonna do it. This is just a thing that has to happen. And the fact that he lets Wilf out and he accepts it, that could be where that character arc ends. That should be the stopping point. The Doctor got to have his little moment. He got to get his reward when he went back to see everybody. He got to be angry and emotional about it. He gets to move on. He has to, like, in his last moments, finally the 10th Doctor has to grow up. And then I Don't Want to Go is just telling the audience, no, he didn't actually do that. He's still at exactly the same headspace that he was when he was throwing that tantrum, and that really sucks. I'm not someone who needs all of the Doctor's, like, last moments or regenerations or whatever to be, like, full circle things. But there's something really sweet and poetic about having what should have been his last moment be like a discussion with Rose and like sending her off, basically live the life that they're going to have. And it's because Rose is stuck in an alternate universe and because their timeline together has made it so that once they meet, they're basically never apart. It's really the only possible moment that he could have ever had with Rose, or like a version of Rose that's close to the one that he knows. And it's really nice. It's such a weird writing choice to not have that be his last moment, like a real conversation with his first companion. Instead, it's this weird line that's directed toward nobody but the audience. He's not saying I don't want to go to anybody. He just says that for the sake of the viewer.
Saying it to God.
Very frequently talks to himself. Talks to himself all the time. And like I feel like you're not wrong. The only thing I will disagree with you on is him saying I don't want to go. I don't think denotes the fact that he hasn't done any personal growing, just because knowing that you have to do something, knowing that something's going to happen, and wanting it to happen are all very separate. Like, you can grow and you can come to terms with the fact that something has to happen, but you don't have to like it. And growing doesn't mean liking it. It means acknowledging whether you do or you don't. And he doesn't.
That's true.
I think I agree, because I think the important thing actually about the scene with Wilf, I always saw the Wilf scene actually similar to Nick. What Nick is saying is that he doesn't want to do this. He could if he a lot more of a worse person and he hadn't learned he needs to do the right thing. And what he's basically saying is, I am like worth more than you, because he's sort of throwing a tantrum about it. But he decides anyway, regardless, I'm going to do the right thing here. And I thought it was actually quite a great summation of what makes the Doctor like character, in that even if he feels otherwise, he will always do the right thing. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go as quite a controversial final line. Personally see it as, sort of, fitting the Doctor's character really, or at least this Doctor, this version of the Doctor, in that, he does the right thing even if he doesn't feel good about it.
I have a question for all of you. Do any of you want to die?
No.
Absolutely.
Ow.
Okay, we need to have a talk after this podcast.
The hotline will be rang by viewers.
That line is, in particular, just his own life ending. And he knows the inevitability of his own death, especially since all the prophecy crap was happening. And I think that's just, that line is spoken in defiance of all of it. Like, he wants to stay and be the Doctor for as long as he can. And I think every version of the Doctor would say the same thing in that situation, because they all want to continue to exist as independent beings.
9 and 11's regenerations, and saying, they're very accepting of it. Not on their own, they're with a companion, and they're basically just doing their best to comfort them. Whereas here, I think it's the Doctor on his own and sort of projecting his own thoughts. And yeah, I know 12 does that as well.
When he has that fit and Wilf is in the chamber, and he talks about the fact that, like, when he's throwing his tantrum, he is basically saying, like, I'm worth more than you, I could do more than you. But then by the time we get to 12, and I'll only touch on this briefly because they're nice, he talks about, like, whichever guy that was, whichever rando had the whale, he tells this man, like, what makes you so special? Like, it's not about that. It's about, like, the measure of a human life. It's about what your life is worth compared to, like, that little orphan down the docks or whatever, and, like, you both are equal. Having 10 say this and then 12 say that.
12 has his outburst too when he gets very angry, where he denounces humans. Like, I think every version of the Doctor has that sort of outburst. And I think 10's tantrum is sort of just another example of that. Sort of a calm position where he can sort of express his true feelings.
The high of thinking that he got out okay. Where, like, the Doctor always has this kind of love-hate thing with humanity, where he's basically, like, the human race's collective daddy. He's able to express, like, great love and pride and affection for them, but also when they screw up, incredible reprimanding. And it's that mixed with the fact that he made it out as far as he was concerned. He was convinced it was going to be the Master or the Time Lords or something. I did it. I freaking beat fate. And then, like, Wilf, who, as much as he might say looks like a giant to him, to the Doctor, one single human will always look kind of like a child, is just there, like, by complete accident, because they did the right thing earlier in the scene. Now he's stuck with the repercussions of that. And that whole rant is like a mix of that and just like, it doesn't matter that I did all the right things, I made all the right moves to get out okay, because by pure accident, like, fate has just decided, nope, it's your time to go anyway. And who wouldn't be mad at that?
It's interesting you guys bring that up because specifically in the case of 11, we get the two sides of the coin on how he presents his feelings on regeneration and how he actually feels, because we got him trying to comfort Clara in Time of the Doctor, and then in Deep Breath we get the phone call afterwards, or before, technically, complicated, and he's discussing how afraid he is of changing and how it's going to affect his relationship with Clara. And I think that's true of every Doctor. They're constantly afraid of that change, and it comes out in these kind of anti-human tirades, like with 10, where he just got really pissed off at Wilf, but really he was pissed off at the fact that he had to die, and he was just taking it out on Wilf, which is why he had that moment where he says, like, I've lived too long. Like, he understands what he's dealing with now is inevitable, and he still has to do the right thing, even at the cost of his own life.
But, like, to round up my thoughts on it, I think the big thing that, for as much as I agree with everything we've been saying that, like, justifies it narratively, I think the big thing that still just niggles at the back of my head is what was brought up earlier, which it really doesn't help smooth the transition to Smith. Like, all this stuff we're talking about makes absolute sense for that to be the way that 10 reacts to things, but I also can't help but feel kind of bitter at Russell for writing it that way. This isn't hypothetical. We saw it happen. It poisons people against Matt Smith coming in, and it's hard not to feel like, well, you could have just not done that. Like pretty much all of the previous regenerations.
I was against 10 when he showed up for like all of 5 minutes. I was against 11 for a good few hours, and 12 took me like some days.
With Moffat writing it differently in Time of the Doctor to say, like, to put a more positive approach on regeneration, I still remember now still a pretty much the same level of toxicity from Smith fans towards Capaldi when he came in.
The tantrum thing is kind of putting in the context what Nick said. I do agree that from a character standpoint, from kind of a development standpoint, it makes sense that Ken has this breakdown, especially because he went through everything he goes through in the last ridiculous hour of his life. And he dies anyway. It makes sense from an emotional standpoint. My issue is more that it feels very like projection in terms of how it's written. I don't think Russell T Davies was bitter he had to leave. He chose to leave. But it still felt like, this is my first Doctor Who. This is my character. I'm going to make this as painful as possible for people. I'm going to make this as in your face as possible. And again, it's just in terms of the writing, I just felt the dialogue was so incredibly bitter and
polarizing
and overwrought for the Doctor as a character, especially because the only person I feel bad for is not him, it's Wilf. He's making this poor guy feel like absolute crap so he can have an emotional catharsis.
Like half an hour.
Like, you, dude.
I know we love Will, but it was literally like, his stupidity that basically just sort of, in that moment at least,
Stupidity.
He saved a life.
Stupidity. But
whoever designed that door.
Thank you.
I chose the wrong choice of words there, but it wasn't stupidity, but like you can sort of understand from the Doctor's point of view why he was like furious, I guess.
I was hoping for this level of chaos when we talked about this episode. Just
And
everybody's
I saw this episode out of context just to end one time when I was like really young and stuff. It was just like the regeneration scene and him pressing the button and everything. And I saw those last lines, and you know what I thought? I said, oh, because I only seen like bits and pieces of Doctor Who before that. I went to myself, oh, he must not actually wanted to leave. That's why they put that line in there.
Somebody did.
It felt very much like I'm going to push my stamp on the show. Rah rah. I'm not trying to make Davies out to be this big boogeyman. He can be a really good writer. I've loved a lot of his stuff in the past. I really want to watch that show years and years he made. But like here, it's just I'm going to use the word self-indulgent a lot, and I apologize. But a lot of his indulgences come out in these last few episodes because this is his last big haul. And he's going to push whatever he can into this last
Master. Time Lords.
I
David Tennant in bondage.
I just want to make one more thing, and that's in terms of the episode structure in general. I like the idea that the 10th Doctor's having a fallout, the awful arrogance he was getting towards, and it was him reeling with it. The problem is the episode just kind of conveniently forgets about that from time to time, partially because we can have Tennant do funny car jokes and make him be wacky Doctor, yay, and partially because the episode has focusing on so much crap, it has no way of streamlining it. I'm not a huge fan of Capaldi's last episode, but I feel that streamlines his arc way more clearly than this does. We get moments where Tennant acknowledges his arrogance, and then it's forgotten about because we have so much more to focus on. That's probably the biggest problem with this episode. There is way too much going on. It is over 2 hours of random crap being thrown in.
Just like this podcast.
Yes.
But yes, Dan, you're right. Partway through part one, and it remained true until we get to like those last 15, 20 minutes. This is just really poorly written in the sense that like moment to moment from one line of dialogue to the next, it doesn't track or make any sense.
I was going to say, Rusty Davis, I don't have anything against him as a writer or person. I don't think he does anything like intentional. I think it's just being tone deaf and kind of just in his own little world that he doesn't realize what he does sometimes.
Both have this problem of getting locked up in their own heads too much. But yeah, like moment to moment, this thing is incomprehensible. And like I can only imagine how strange it must have been to casual viewers at the time. Again, like the silent majority who's not like super invested in Doctor Who lore or doesn't think about episodes all that critically. I feel like this would have to be the kind of thing that just washes over you. Like it's complete nonsense.
Yes. I can tell you that from experience. Yes.
I'm feeling things, but I don't know why.
It's so weird to me that this doesn't even feel like a story. Like, it doesn't even feel like a first draft. It feels like a Mad Lib.
Yes.
It feels like Russell was on some kind of cocaine bender when he decided, like, yes, this is what I want mine and Tennant's final note on the show to be.
Just imagine, like, Davis doing a line and then just going off, cactus people.
Yeah.
Non-Sim becomes a Sith.
The Doctor falls the window, hits the floor, doesn't suffer any damage, yes.
I had to take note of this as it was happening. where in Brianna's own words, like, why does Naismith keep touching his daughter like that?
Okay, guys, I gotta say this for everybody. You can censor it or whatever. That dude is absolutely his daughter. I said this in the chat.
No.
100% Martian Manhunter's daughter. I'm sorry.
It had a very Trump and his daughter vibe, didn't it?
Yeah.
It's gross because I was gonna say it too.
What is the plan? Why are you doing this?
I was expecting them to make out at like
Just
3 different points that they were on screen, and I was just like, please don't do it.
I can't
Skip
remember
through.
why. Why were they in the episode?
D. Amanda Hagen called it a gish gallop. So basically,
Yes.
random crap just comes in, so you're distracted by the more random crap that comes up.
It's the Ben Shapiro argument style.
Yeah.
Just throw random crap at the wall until they get overwhelmed.
Oh, the Ben
I
Shapiro
think he was probably
episode.
talking at the same level of Ben Shapiro when he was writing the script. Like, okay, so
There is so much stuff you could cut out and streamline this and make it so much better. The cactus people do not need to be there. The master turning himself into everyone doesn't really go anywhere. The incest family thing is only there to introduce the plot point of the gate. You could have easily introduced that somehow else. There's so much crap. Obama finishing the recession with a speech.
I did like the master when he came in and was like, oh yeah, that's resolution. Oh yeah, deleted.
Yeah.
Donna's entire thing could have been cut. Thank you for bringing back my favorite companion of the new era, rather not doing anything with her, Russell T. Davis. I really appreciate that.
He dug himself into a hole with that one because he wanted to bring Donna back for like a nostalgia thing.
Yeah.
But then was like, hang on, but she can't remember the Doctor, and if not, her head will literally blow up. So.
Her mind will burn and she will die.
All right.
It won't.
But here's the thing: he could have just done the wedding thing and give her gelato. That's all he had to do.
He had let the master take over Donna's brain. What if he could have just deleted the Time Lord half?
The Master had a cult that supported Harold Saxon.
Oh my god.
But
no.
also knew that he was the master. Let's not forget that.
After his wife shot him, after he murdered the president and/or president-elect on live TV, she gets sent to prison, and not like a regular prison, but like a prison where it's just her, seemingly, and a bunch of orderlies who are like master cultists, and they've read the secret books of Saxon, whatever that means.
Can we talk about the dialogue delivery in that scene? Because every single line in that scene made me want to implode and die because it was just so bad.
That whole scene is a microcosm of this story because it's just one line of dialogue after another that does not make sense either in a vacuum or as a response to the thing that was just said. Like, she has a spy for her in the prison with her as an orderly. How? She's like, I have contacts. Couldn't you get those contacts to let you out of prison?
No. The contacts were to make the anti-life equation. So presumably it was Darkseid.
Can
she
I
had
just
that
say,
little vial of like death concentrate.
Weird dark magic or something to like bring him back from the dead.
can I just say, of all the ridiculous crap that is in this story, probably one of the most insane things is that the Prime Minister of England has a cult following him. They don't seem to know he's the master. They know he's not human, but it's like if David Cameron had a cult following him. It's, was it the books of Harold Saxon next to the ancient secret occultist texts of David Lloyd George. It is the most ridiculous thing. She had a trial again, as Nick pointed out. This woman murdered the man who killed the president-elect of America on live TV and managed to have a kangaroo court in secret with nobody seeming to know what happened to her, nobody questioning it, nobody seeming to realize where she is, and also the governor, which the UK doesn't have governors in the same way the US does. Once again, Russell T. Davis' amazing, weird way of understanding politics of his own country.
How does he not know that the UK doesn't have governors?
Is the woman that replaces the existing governor or governess like the type of governess that watches over people, like a babysitter? Because that would make sense in that scene.
Tried to be political. That's how they hide her in the cell. And like, she manages to find contacts of people sneaking in. Like, nothing about any of that setup makes any sense.
He used the word governor, so because he thought, oh, the MP for York might sound a bit, not as rank.
Like, I know he understands politics. He's written political shows before. I just think it's ridiculous between that and the series 3 arc. Her plan to kill the master only managed to make him more powerful and unstable. Well done, you dumbass.
You turned him into the Flash.
Or like Static Shock.
This is where it becomes really easy to say that Russell T Davies isn't a good writer, because we know that he is. We know that he has great stories in him. But it's not just that this doesn't make any sense. It's that this is several long minutes of screen time, pretty much the entirety of part 1 of this story, dedicated to 2 really stupid conceits. One is, I want to give the Master superpowers and I want him to be Static Shock. And, like, the whole cult thing is just, like, a pretense to get that to happen, pretty much.
Yeah.
And one, I want to have my really cool Master Race pun, which is and
Okay, I love that pun.
but here's the thing, because Diamanda Hagen, in her review of this story, Diamanda Hagen raised a really good point, which is that for decades the Master has been like really, really good at hypnotizing people. Like, you could just have it be that instead of his wife shot him and like she got put on trial and all that, have it be that like way back in Last of the Time Lords, he realized he lost, so he hypnotized his wife to shoot him as like a roundabout escape plan and like revive him later. Puts himself in a position, forget the Naismiths, lose them entirely. He gets in a position where he can like use some kind of technology or whatever to just mass hypnotize the entire human race, because there's nothing that's accomplished in this story by everyone being the Master that couldn't have been just as easily accomplished and presumably save money by just having him hypnotize everyone. And you can still use the Master Race pun if you do that.
Maybe that was
I have a
reason it was
question
written.
for Dan and Rob specifically, because this pertains to Classic Who. How do you guys feel about the Master's entire character being based on the Four Knox bullshit this episode?
I hate it. I hate it.
Isn't it mostly related to sort of the drumming thing in his head?
Yeah.
Yeah, they
that
made it
was
so he's
some
crazy because he constantly heard the drums.
Introduced by Russell T Davies in Utopia that was never in the classic series, was never hinted at all. And all of a sudden we've got this idea that the Master apparently he is drumming in his head 90% of the time, and he always just like taps his fingers reflecting it, and that's what's driving him mad. So why in no episodes of the classic series do we see him acting like that?
The Master's essentially Moriarty to Sherlock Holmes as the Doctor. He's just the Doctor, but without the more conscious and megalomania. He's not crazy. And because of that, all the new Masters seems to be depicted as they're crazy and kooky. And
Classic series too. After Roger Delgado, Anthony Ainley was just some sort of stereotypical Bond villain.
yeah,
Eric Roberts was the guy possessing people and walking with a weird sort of stage cloak saying, I am dressed for the occasion.
I just want to say Andy Ainley's costume things is so infamously stupid that there is one story where he's costumed and there is absolutely no reason for him to be in a disguise.
He stands around disguised as a Chinese guy, babbling incoherently to himself in a foreign language.
No one else is around. No one can recognize
Can I
him.
just jump in on this? Because, like, the Master's always been a bit wacky, right? And so, like, there's an episode of the Third Doctor with Delgado where he pulls up in a car and you hear the intimidating music or whatever, and then he reaches up to the radio of the car and he turns it off, and he was playing his own spooky.
Delgado's Master was kind of like wacky like that, but I think he'd be in a more sort of charming way. John Sim running around, like, eating everything up and with his whole jumping in the sky and, like, eating people is like a bit... You're on something here, man.
Russell lent him some of the cocaine before his performances.
I know all of you have done cocaine on this podcast, right? But
yes.
Does it make you hungry? Because Russell T Davies definitely wrote this script when he was on some sort of hunger strike or something, because he was obsessed with it. Takes up a lot of screen time, and I don't understand why.
I've heard cocaine actually makes you lose weight, so...
What some things seem to happen with the script of this is that it's very retrofitted. It's like he came up with ideas for scenes and moments, cool things.
Zack Snyder method of writing.
Yeah, and he retroactively realized the justification for it. The Naismiths are only there because they need a machine for the Master to turn everyone into him. That's the only reason they exist.
But why were the Vinvachi there, Dan?
Brianna brings up a good point. A throwaway line. Naismith mentions that he acquired Torchwood. Whatever that means.
A government organization?
Torchwood is extinct.
I think they meant specifically the gate, not the entire organization of Torchwood in that scene.
He specifically says, I acquired Torchwood.
He got the dinosaur. That was the only thing left.
I thought he said, I acquired it, and he was referring to the gate. I kind of want to pull the episode up because
This doesn't so much feel like a first draft. Feel like Russell T Davies invented post-it notes they had to push together to make a script.
And then
throwing
he
itself
ground them
all
up
over
and
the wall.
snorted them.
Brianna's found the line of dialogue.
The gate was found inside a spaceship buried at the foot of Mount Snowdon. It was moved to an institute known as Torchwood, but when Torchwood fell, legends say I acquired it.
Yeah, I'm
Right.
fairly certain the it there is a pronoun for the gate, but it could be Torchwood. I acquired the smoldering corpse of Grey.
On the list of Naismith-related, Brianna comments, why did they give the Master a literal Fido leash?
Okay, let's not kink shame Russell T Davies here, guys. Come on.
A dog collar, and just for some reason, I'm going to leave it on you while you sit at our dinner table and eat this entire spread of food, because that's what I have to do today.
There was a little bit of like S&M in this. He tied the doctor
Wait
up.
a minute.
Yes,
these
a little bit,
Look,
Ritzy, a little
He
bit.
just his weird sexual hang-ups into the script.
Yeah, do these characters just exist
Say
in
my
this
name.
story as
Yes.
like Russell's weird deviant fetish outlet?
Wait, did you guys think that the Doctor Who wasn't that?
Further discussion of why the Master turning everyone into himself was unnecessary.
Did any of them have sex with each other at any point?
I would assume that some of them were in the process of having sex with each other when they turned into doctors, so they would have just kept going.
No,
Yeah,
no.
they would have.
They
Right.
should cut to
Ah.
somebody getting ready
Alright.
for like a sex orgy and like, okay.
Before this becomes a whole deviant fetish podcast,
We already had a whole episode about genitals.
why do all of them have to communicate with each other on
Yeah.
screen if they share a brain?
Sneak up on the Master and surprise him and disguise themselves if they all have the same thought.
We had two like conflicting explanations, because at one point he's like, everybody focus, and then all of the masters in the world do it at the same time, so they can definitely understand that he's saying that, but then
Yeah.
also doesn't know when one of his selves has been knocked out, and he's like, so doctor, where's Target? What the hell?
Time Lords are
That's
telepathic,
why this.
so they do connect. It's implied that they would share a hive mind, because there's certain moments where he just knows things because other masters know them as well, but it's not very well explained at all.
A moment, scene to scene, the logic of this story does not track. But also, the Doctor's like, did he really think I'd leave my best friend alone without a defense mechanism? Oh, you mean a defense mechanism that leaves her unconscious and knocked
In
out
the middle of the street.
where everyone on the planet is a danger to her? Like, it knocked out 5 masters who happened to have her cornered. Great, now she's knocked out in the middle of the street where any other master...
In this whole like apartment block.
That scene from like the Matrix Reloaded when all the
He's just-
Smiths come in through the gate, but it's all like
He is
John
just-
Sims.
That the Johnson Master has no ability to concentrate on anything at one point, because he just completely ignores the fact that Donna is just lying on the street unconscious somewhere.
But he can throw a diamond into a hologram.
Say, Rassilon was originally meant to be played by Patrick Stewart, so I'll that.
At one point in this episode, Rassilon's given like his big speech to the other Time Lords, and Eden just turns to me and says, "What is Rassilon saying? He's just been speaking nonsense in every scene."
Nothing but nonsense in the entire episode. Everything he said meant nothing.
His speech throughout the first part of the episode is him just randomly talking to his guard. Why is he talking about the Earth holiday known as Christmas? What has this got to do with what the hell we're doing?
Hold on. I'm pretty sure he was actually talking to all of the Time Lords, so all of them were just there, just like completely silent, listening to him spin this random yarn while they're all dying in the middle of a war.
Planet is imploding. Have you ever heard about this holiday called Christmas?
Christmas?
Maybe if he knows that like this is the point in time that we're gonna come out to, and it's like this is what Earth is doing when we're gonna show up. But there's no reason that they should care, since by coming there, they're gonna obliterate Earth in like 5 seconds.
I love that we're nearly 90 minutes in and only now we've brought up the Time Lords.
It's almost like they're an afterthought in this story or something.
The Time Lords are non-characters.
Can we talk about the amount of saliva that was coming out of Timothy Dalton's mouth?
Yes.
Dialogue was just him spitting.
It's like that episode of Friends where Joey's next to the actor and the guy keeps spitting to enunciate.
Yes. Oh my god.
In Matt Smith's first scene, so he sort of like spits on the console. Like there's a lot of spitting in this story. Basically, that's the whole gist of it.
The only plot relevant thing Everyone's a Master thing does is that it tracks the drum beat in his head through all of them to triangulate where the diamond's going to land, which makes sense until you realize it's a sound in his head. It's just going to be in all their heads.
I just want to point out that we cut to that evil laugh in the first episode about 10 times.
If I had to see that filter one more time, I was going to go to the editor and beat them to death.
Does he ever actually laugh like that in the events of the episode?
No.
No.
Okay, awesome, cool.
It's supposed to be a tribute to the way Anthony Ainley used to laugh.
Why does it have to be in there 20 times?
Why the filter, though?
20 times.
It's a nightmare, Dan.
Because again,
It's so dumb.
the issue of not doing this chronologically, we haven't even gotten to any of the Ood stuff and how superfluous
Oh
that
my
is.
god, the Ood are in this episode.
But hang on.
We need to cooperate with you.
All of this ties back to the same problem, which is, again, something that Russell and Moffat both share, but Russell has it way more, which is that he'll just do things in his story for no reason other than to like create this nebulous sense of something is coming and like this sense of portentousness. The Ood are like that. He only goes to the Ood so that they can tell him something's coming. Why is every human being on Earth apparently dreaming of the Master? No reason. We just gotta let the audience know something's coming. Why is the weird plot device lady who's not the Doctor's mom in the first scene? No reason. We just gotta let the audience know something's coming.
She's literally a plot device. It's so annoying.
Okay, I have an explanation for all this, and it's stupid and awful, but pretty sure the official explanation, because Russell T Davies does not understand how time works. When they're talking to the Ood, and he says time itself is bleeding because the Time Lords are coming out of the time lock while they were talking to the Ood, because everything in time is happening at once if you're moving in the fourth dimension. So Doctor's mom showing up, the Ood developing way too fast, people having dreams of the Master, was apparently all because of some kind of weird nebulous time theory that never gets explained beyond that first scene and is never followed up on afterwards. We just get that one throwaway line of dialogue.
I just really like the amount of angst spent throughout basically most of the modern series of, man, the Doctor killed his people, sad, they can't ever come back. Second they come back, no, put that back where it came from. No, get away.
Put that thing back where it came from, or so help me.
That is a bit of a hangover from the classic series because he's a very complicated relationship with his people.
I think it's one of those things he likes just having them in the back, like dead. He likes having them dead, so he has these angsty scenes.
He doesn't actually miss them. He just like uses it to lure women into the TARDIS. Like
Wilf is all like, "Oh, what? I heard your people. They seem great." He goes, "They went crazy near the end of the war. They're so thing." And it's like, "No, dude, your people have always been awful. There's not a single story in Doctor Who where the Time Lords are the good guys. They're terrible. They're awful."
While the Time Lords like indoctrinate children at age 8, implant them with this thing that sends them in one of three.
From what I understand,
directions.
is like the political structure of Gallifrey was like the corrupting force, because like you meet individual Gallifreyans and they seem like pretty nice people, but then you get to like the Grand Vizier Godman or whatever the hell Rassilon's title is, Supreme Overlord God. Yeah, Rassilon the Endless or whatever. And like those people, and they're just like American billionaires. They're just like, yes, burn the pores to stain our life force.
Speaking of things that just make me go like, why is this happening? Again, connecting to the Naismiths.
This whole episode.
The one positive thing I'll say about the whole like acquired the gate from Torchwood thing is that does in fact make this story in a small way fall out from Children of Earth, which is neat. Like if Children of Earth hadn't happened, then this story doesn't happen. Why does Donna buy Wilf that guy's book? Why? What is that?
Because in her own way, she's helping the Doctor by showing him a book of a face he saw randomly, and that's how she contributes to the story. He couldn't have found him any other way.
Okay.
She's got Time Lord brain.
This episode's understanding of time is always going to be a thing of wonder. Like, they do have that bit where they try to explain because the Doctor is a part of the Master's timeline, he can't go back in his own timeline to fix it, which is kind of makes sense, but also that's bit where he's at the Ood's fortress running to his and is frantic. You have a time machine. You don't need to run. You can just go back before this happens and prevent it. You absolute moron.
No, I never considered that. That is very true, actually. Yeah.
He has a very weird running face, too. I didn't like it at all. He was just like, when he was running back to the TARDIS, it looked really awful. I don't know why.
David Tennant probably has the worst cum face.
And this is probably just my own thing of like, I don't like regeneration stories being these big, massive, end of all things, big spectacle, blowout kind of things, because like generally they're just outside of one or two exceptions, they're just stories that the Doctor goes on and he just doesn't get lucky. Like, I think Eccleston's last story is a very great example of that. Even if it's a sequel, if it's a follow-up from one of his previous stories, he just encounters the Daleks again in this base, and he dies defeating them. And I just like it when it's just that kind of, we see the best of the Doctor in this story that he just happens to be on, and he just happens to make it. Not these big, epic, wondrous things that are set up in such a massively impactful way, because they do the same with Smith as well.
Single villain showed up for the Christmas episode.
Yeah.
Weeping Angels appear for like 3 seconds.
There's this whole thing about the start where it looks like they're setting up like it's a sequel to Planet of the Ood, where the Ood have advanced way too fast beyond there, and literally that hint of a story is 1,000 times more interesting to me as a last 10th Doctor story than everything else we get. I'm like, make the 10th Doctor story just a sequel to a random story adventure he had where he doesn't make it because of the fallout of it. Nothing with this crap with the Master or the Destiny with Wilf or all that stuff. I was just like, I want to know why one of them's talking like Brian Cox. This is really interesting. And we get nothing. It's forgotten about until the end. And it's just, we get this boring, crazy Master instead. And it's like,
if they had just kept the episode to the Time Lords and the Master, because he's a Time Lord too, it would have been fine. But it was just like cramming every single other thing in on top of it that made it just awful.
And again, I want to compliment Twice Upon a Time again. That's another kind of self-contained, kind of downbeat story. But that was done by accident because Moffat wanted to keep the Christmas slot.
Yeah.
And then lost it next year.
I actually kind of liked that they ended it on a low key because it was a refreshing contrast to the past regeneration stories, really.
Exactly. One of the most celebrated stories is of the case of Androzani. And it's literally a story where the Doctor just gets involved in a conflict he has no interest in. And he has no way of making better. Because if it's about him trying to escape with this person and trying to save their lives, it's 1,000 times more interesting because it's not building up 10th Doctor's ego to make a story around it.
And then you've got Sylvester McCoy, who died being shot by a gang 15 minutes into a TV movie. And Colin Baker, who died hitting his head on the TARDIS console.
One of the Doctor's deaths is complications due to surgery.
Entirely down to incompetence from the doctors who were just working on it. Like, nothing to do with him.
Wasn't he in America and got shot?
Yep.
Yeah,
exactly.
By one of the lamest looking street gangs you will ever find.
I'm just imagining him getting shot, and it's just like Donald Glover. He's just like, "This is America." Lucy, if you can do this, we need another Doctor Who crap video.
I can't finish this without talking about the scene with the Master and the homeless guys, which I think is the most memorable bit from this whole.
And as Brianna mentioned, it takes those two guys way too long to run from him.
My favorite bit about that isn't even the complete over-the-top insanity of him just shouting dinner time then eating them. My favorite is how they literally just recognize him as the former Prime Minister and just go, "You look like that bloke.
You look like the guy who went crazy and murdered a man on live television. Maybe we should leave."
I think we all know the real best part of that scene is when they go back to the food truck and it shows the two anatomy science skeletons still smoking somehow, and the camera just goes boom like this, and I'm just like, oh god.
That burger van must not get a lot of customers. It's in the middle of absolute nowhere.
Yeah, like it was in a junkyard. Like with the
we see the Master fly in an earlier moment, but in this one he uses his electricity powers to project himself off the ground to fly in this bit. Why?
Into Emperor Palpatine. Like they did it with Davros in Revelation of the Daleks and Journey's End, and they did it with the Master here. And it's just like, yeah, we get it. You like Star Wars. Master and Davros are not like Palpatine. Chill.
And he stood at the podium, and then several hours to a day pass, and when we check in with President Master, he still stood at the podium. For hours to a day.
I guess he was just recounting to himself famous presidential speeches. Rassilon, tear down this wall.
That's not what your country can do for you.
What the Master can do for your country.
I think it's maybe time for us to wind down with the discussion of the Feral Rate of Death, with the exception of the Jack bit, which is charming, and the Rose bit, which I like. All of it feels really weird and perfunctory. Like, to have the farewell to Sarah Jane be like he gets Luke out of the way from a car and then just leaves.
Yeah.
Feels really weird. Like, why would you even bother with that then?
It's like a guardian angel thing. With
massive coincidence he showed up.
He just saves him and then is like, looks over at her and is like, this is the last time we'll ever meet. Bye.
Like her again anyway, so later on.
Yeah, as 11. I keep forgetting that one.
And like, as 11, that episode actually makes this even worse, because 11 confirms that he didn't just visit all of the companions that he had at one point as 10. He revisited every companion that he's ever had, starting with Ian and Barbara.
Did he even Dodo, Mel, Adric?
He
Did
should
he
have.
revisit Adam?
But this is another thing of like Russell's just weird self-indulgence of like what makes this regeneration that special?
He wrote out of the Doctor too.
Wow!
It's the only time he wrote for Matt Smith.
Why? Why did he think that this was a good idea?
Can I just say we missed an opportunity to have Frobisher?
Yeah.
I want Frobisher to be canon.
Get Frobisher on screen.
We need a crime-solving, shape-shifting detective in Doctor Who, and we need it now.
Yeah. Having Mickey and Martha get married is a choice.
In Poison Sky, she says she's engaged to that guy from like Last of the Time Lords. How they met is a whole other thing that
she's engaged to Lucifer and then drops him.
From Mickey. Literally one scene together in a previous episode where they did not talk.
Because we needed another dumb Smith and Jones pun to talk about Martha's presence on the show.
Hooray.
I also have to point out that they're the only two black companions up until that point.
Yep.
So it's just like,
yeah.
What the hell were you thinking, dude?
I mean, we managed to avoid talking about the sexual harassment, possibly implicit racial angle.
I'm going to say there's two sexual predators in this episode.
De resistance, which is French for lactose intolerant. He goes to visit Joan Redfern's granddaughter. Why?
Like I said, that scene would have made more sense if this was more about Ten's character and the fact that like his inhumanity of being a Time Lord was making him go to really dark extremes, and him visiting the character in his era that made him literally feel the most human.
But then visit Joan, not her granddaughter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can we also talk about the fact that the scene where they go into the book signing, the dialogue for that right up until he shows up is actually horrible.
She's explaining the book. He's coming over to get signed.
She had like this relationship with this guy named John Smith, but it turned out he was an alien. This is all a true story. I found the notes in my grandma's journals in the attic.
She said that she never wanted to see him again for understandable reasons.
I get why she wouldn't have visited her. I think it's dumb that her granddaughter looks exactly like her, but I mean, they wanted to bring Jessica Hines back, so fine.
I mean, they've done that in a lot of shows, to be honest, where they have somebody play the younger part.
Yeah.
I'm not too mad at that.
I know we already talked about the Rose scene to death. I do want to bring up, I think you hinted at it, Nick. The lighting choice is so weird because they clearly just wanted to show David Tennant's face, but they wanted to imply he was hidden in the shadows so Rose couldn't see him. But they overlit the scene to the point where it's so clearly obvious that Rose can see who it is very clearly, which is obviously a kind of a plot hole kind of thing, but it's mostly because the lighting is really dumb in that moment.
It doesn't look like a street. It looks like a set that's dressed up to look like a street.
Yeah, they should have made it clearer through the editing or through the shot composition that Rose can't make out his face.
A pair of red eyes glowing in the night. Have a good year.
He should have disguised his voice like that.
Yes, the Batman voice.
Yes.
Oh my god.
Like he could have put like a mask on, like a New Year's like mask or something. It's
oh god.
Yeah.
It actually would have been better, honestly.
Yeah.
And did the Batman voice while he did it, so there wouldn't be no time problems.
We're now moving on to the not at all controversial Moffat era. We're moving on to my first episode of Doctor Who.
It's going to be so refreshing to get onto Series 5. We're at a point now where I'm so tired with like the feeling of Russell era Who. After all these years of doing Russell era recaps, I'm ready to move on.
Wait, we have one more Miracle Day before we can move on.
That doesn't count.
Yes, it does.
From midnight up until this episode, all of them have a writing credit for Russell T Davies. And it gets even worse because if you go from Stephen Moffat's two-parter, from the Science and Library two-parter, up until the Time of Angels two-parter, it's just two writers writing the episodes outside of Mark Gaddis's one.
Not a lot of variety.
And that's a bad one.
And that's not great. It's the same two names over and over and over and over and over and over again for nearly a series worth of episodes.
So like now?
Pretty much.
Basically.
I like a lot of series.
Yeah, because it's my favorite series in the new era. There's only 2 episodes with a co-writing credit in the specials. Outside of that, it's all just Russell T Davies' credit. The End of Time. If you didn't pick up, I did not like it.
I'm even more looking forward to Miracle Day. I'm sure Miracle Day is going to feel like a step up from this.
Will it though?
I like everything to do with the regeneration itself, and unlike other people, I have to definitely admit the story is a kind of a pile of crap. So mixed thoughts overall. Thankfully, the next episode will be better. Yeah, there we go.
I like that we're moving on to 11th Hour because it's a better episode and it's probably my favorite of the post-regeneration stories anyway. Yeah, I mean, we've pretty much exhausted everything I want to say. It's a giant mess, and I wish that Russell T Davies had picked a story to tell instead of all of them, and we might have had something a bit more coherent.
It's a giant turd.
The best thing about this episode is that it ended.
Yeah.
And also will.
The end of time.
The end of time.
After about 2.5 hours.
I don't want to go.
I do. I want to go so bad. Please God, let me go.
Yeah, I have
I'll just
better
stay doing
things
the
to watch.
stream by myself, talking to myself until 2 a.m.
We barely brought up
Rob,
stuff about
what
it,
did
to
you
be
think
honest.
at the end? Oh, well, Rob, I thought it was...
We barely talked about not the Doctor's mother.
Yeah, okay. That was
Oh,
absolutely his mom. I have to talk about this because in the scene where Wilf asks who the woman was, it very clearly positions the camera so that you can see Donna and her mother and nothing else in the shot. And it was like very clearly implying that the relationship existed between this woman and the Doctor. But now that we've got that episode in series 12,
Yeah.
who knows?
This was something.
Yeah.
Something bad. The end.
Like I said, we didn't even bring up everything in this episode. That's how bad it is, and it's nearly 2 hours.
Ugh.
How about, like, there's still DNA on the Master's ex-wife, so they can clone
Oh, yeah, I
him?
forgot about that. How bad the spaceship chase is, up to the point where the Doctor survives one of the most amazingly stupid falls and lands on concrete and is fine.
He lands on marble. It's actually, I'm pretty sure, harder than concrete.
That's what I brought up briefly. We didn't talk about how stupid the door thing is.
I do love the scene where he crashes through the window. The way he
That's what
looks
yeah.
Oh, no, I hate it.
like...
I hate it. It's just so...
like ignoring how dumb it is, he survives that. The shot itself is really bad.
I never thought about this, but like, why does Rassilon act as if a single revolver shot can kill him?
Mortal God would have.
He's like, make your enemy. I'm like, you can only kill one of us. I'm like, how? Like, even if he got a headshot, right? Like, he could still regenerate.
Yeah, this episode ignores everything about the continuity of Rassilon anyway, but he is immortal.
Yeah, like immortal.
You
Yeah.
can't run out regenerations.
Like, how the hell is he just a regular guy here?
All I can say is he's not the worst Rassilon.
Like this scene where the Master's like, haha, look at my amazing plan to turn myself into every Time Lord. And then Rassilon literally just like flicks his wrist and just undoes everything.
That was
Really, man.
the last like near hour of this entire series has been a waste of time.
Forget the end of
Not
time.
really.
This was the waste of time.
Yes.
Also, like you said, like the Master also has like an Infinity Gauntlet, which is supposed to make him look impressive, but it all honestly makes him weaker. So I didn't really want to do the whole, oh, it's not like it happened in the classic series, rah, rah, rah. But like, and only other time you see him on the show, he literally turns a guy to stone while he's in a coma. This is something Diamanda Hagen brought up. And again, they could have put in a line saying they had to control his power by reviving him by using the stupid gauntlet. But why do the Lords of Time, who can see through time, have a fortune teller?
Cause.
Maybe that's
Just
how they
cause.
see through time.
Also, another fun fact: the Daleks were supposed to be in this episode, but Moffat wanted to use them for victory the
Oh.
Daleks. That's why they have the cameo in Waters of Mars.
No!
You could try verifying this. Like a lot of Doctor Who, this could be a lot of hearsay because there's a lot of weird rumor going around. But like, it would explain why we're in the Time War and we never see the Daleks.
Oh, yeah. Probably true. Yeah.
Well, I mean, technically, we only see like a single ramp
That's why-
with no guardrails that they could have just fallen off of.
That's why they probably crammed them into Waters of Mars. Again, it does make sense in context of that story, but they needed to put them in so they could pay nations to state.
It's just like, how are they that advanced and they don't have like basic OHSA compliance with their railings? It bothers me so much. Like if you trip, you just fall down and die.
I guess
That
they
would've
go
been-
with Star Wars logic.
Yeah, it's like,
I
oh,
would
whoops, there
actually
goes
love
another
that.
generation.
He's just walking over saying, "We shall return the Time Lords. We shall reclaim Gala," and then he just falls off. Like-
I will say the cliffhanger, the Time Lords returning, is really cool until you get to the next episode and see how they're used.
The fact that they
Yep.
made him the like overworld narrator of the episode and then revealed him to be an actual character was like a masterclass moment. It was in such a shitty episode. They ruined it.
A lot of the good things in this story, I'm just kind of like, why weren't you in a better episode?
Exactly.
Like, I
Yeah.
think Time Lord stuff is all build up and then no real resolution. Similar to the problem with the series 2 finale, where it's just like, oh, the Genesis arc comes out at the end and you just get all sucked back in 2 seconds
Yeah.
after. It's like,
David
Davis thing
shoots
does, really.
an electrical box and stops the most powerful race in the history of the universe.
I used to think because I was misled, and also the episode doesn't make this entirely clear because the doctor just rattles off some exposition. The only way to get out of that chamber with the doors is have it fill in with radiation. Do you know the weird locking thing where you have to be in the other door?
We call
to
it
unlock
the
door?
Owen door.
But no, what happened was the master overcharged the machine, and that was flooding radiation. So the doctor letting Wilf out would fine. Why is the door designed like that? I do not understand the logic at all.
It's the David
Well,
death
Nick
chamber.
wants to make his daughter immortal so he can carry on banging her. So there's that.
The thing is, like,
Forever.
this isn't even a nitpick. It's an important plot point because this is why the 10th Doctor dies.
Yeah.
David Tennant has this obsession with making like machines like death traps. He did it again in like at the end of the world. Yeah, you had to get through the propellers. You had to have one person hold this side. It was the same thing. You had to have two people do it. One person had to hold one side, the propeller stop.
And if they hold it long enough, they burn.
Yeah, so they had to hold it, and yeah, so we
I'm
could
just
run
questioning,
through.
questioning this, but why in the end of the world is the whole emergency lever behind the fans?
Okay,
Like
it's the
stopping the
future,
bullet.
guys. Their
Go-
brains are way beyond our understanding.
This ship seemed to be designed by the guy who could develop the Spencer Mansion in Resident Evil.
Yes. Oh my God. Just death traps everywhere. Fill the room with zombies too.
It was like made by a video game designer.
I didn't want to go into the door thing because I would have been here for hours. I just don't understand it. It's so stupid. It's just so contrived to bring out the drama of that moment. It makes no sense. I hate it. I hate it so much.
What do you think about the cactus people? Because I think they're the only thing in this story we haven't discussed.
Yeah, they leave such a little impression. They're literally just there so the Doctor and Wilf can have a moment
And the
away from the
Wilf.
plot.
That is how we should refer to him, the Wilf.
The Wilf.
But yeah, but they take the main characters out of the story so the Master can do his stupid mind meld thing and bring the Time Lords here, and that's literally their only purpose. They serve no other purpose.
They're also
and
conveniently there to
they
sort of
bring-
save the Doctor in part 2 by disguising themselves as one of the guards, which makes no sense at all.
They just bring the Doctor out. The Doctor has a scene, and he comes back, and they drop Wilf off, and then just
I still believe in my heart of hearts that Wilf got super cancer after hugging 10 when he came out of that chamber. I still think that dude was radioactive as shit. That is my headcanon for the end of Wilf.
That's why he was crying in his final scene when 10 went. He was like,
Yeah,
I'll never know.
mwah.
You'll never know.
I
He
don't-
got the cancer.
like I said in the group chat, at least with the third Doctor, we don't know how long he was gone since he went to the Spider Planet. So the radiation could have worn off by then.
I can't imagine that he wasn't radioactive coming out of that box.
That's why
He
he ended
just-
up looking like Tom Baker.
And he must have been radioactive during the first good chunk of the Parade of Death, right?
Tom Baker's the only actor who can convincingly play an alien where I'm just there like, this guy is not human. He is an alien. He always has
What
been.
if 10's Parade of Death was an actual Parade of Death because he was radioactive and everyone that he hung out with died afterwards?
Again, he just decided, I'm going to kill all of my 500 ex-companions. And that's why he jumped and grabbed Luke. He didn't even see the car coming. He just decided, I'm going to infect Luke with radiation because I don't like him. So he just grabbed him.
Your death is not allowed to be quick. It must be slow and painful.
The thing I will comment on about the cactuses is that I recognize
Cacti.
the one who played the female cactus from being human. That's literally it.
Apparently, they were flesh colored before, and then they added the green with post.
Oh dear God, that would have been awful.
The makeup was so bad, they just CG'd over them, and it still looks really bad.
That
CG.
would have been Coneheads level uncanny. I don't know if any of you have ever seen that movie. But,
Don't you love the fact the Nate Smiths were arrested off screen like every billionaire would?
Yeah, we live in a just world, man. When billionaires get
What
arrested,
crime-
they go to jail.
What crime exactly did they arrest him of? Arrest him
Incest?
for?
I'm gonna go ahead and say incest too. Yeah.
Okay, we're not going to put you in jail for the whole device.
How do you explain that in a court of law? It was a radioactive device that brought a giant planet down, and all these weird cloaked men were there, and this old guy who just disappeared was in the doors that make no sense. That would have been an amazing court trial, that's all I'm saying. And all of it disappears as soon as the Doctor shoots the machine.
Yep. All of it explodes.
Why was he so upset that he thought he was going to have to kill somebody if all he had to do was shoot the generator?
How did a World War II era pistol destroy a space-built machinery?
I guess it didn't
Because-
think someone would shoot at it. I mean, I don't think it was designed to be shot at.
Again, we did not talk about nearly as much about this episode as we did.
The whole psychic link being turned into a physical bridge was completely ridiculous. They were just the
It's in
triangulation,
your head.
and then they sent the white point star, so there was a physical tie. And I was like, how did you send that if you can't send anything physical?
During the thing to listen to the sound, he says the sound is tangible.
I think it's because like he can send it to other people like he did with 10 instead of it just being like a figment of his imagination maybe, but like it was really awful dialogue.
Then when they were in the junkyard or wherever that was, I love that they were like chasing each other and the master just stops every once in a while and just screams, ah!
That was pretty great.
Time Lords are psychic, so him projecting the sound itself into people's heads, that's okay. But the fact that he managed to link all the masters till the sound became a physical thing he could track down is nonsense.
Oh yeah, do you mean like when they were looking for the White Point Star, or do you mean when they were using it to like reach back in time and talk to the Time Lords? Because none of that made sense.
No, well, like, both of them are stupid, but I was talking about the White Point Star.
Yeah, because I think when they were trying to find the location for that, he was literally just like, send the nearest master races in.
Lucy, I am so sorry you're going to have to listen to this nonsense when you're editing the episode.
Oh yeah, this is all garbage, just like most of the episodes.
Yeah, I was trying to not be my nitpicky, annoying, and just going through the episode piece by piece and going over the broad overall things, but like, there's so much in this episode. I keep on remembering as we're talking.
It's so fascinating. Like
it's like a Russian nesting doll of crap.
I love like Nick just leaves and said, "Okay, I think we covered everything."
Right, so you got any final thoughts? And then 30 minutes happened. Like,
have you got any final thoughts? Well,
I think the 10th Doctor is electric proof because he gets hit by electric with the Master, shoots him. He also gets hit with electric in the Dalek and Manhattan's episode. He is.
I'd like to think that he increased his durability after the whole Tom Baker incident because, like, he survives that fall. Yeah. He survived that fall that would have killed him a couple of regenerations.
Nick actually brought up a really interesting point that some doctors have different physical abilities than other ones, and that's how Tom Baker can die from a tiny fall, and David Tennant can survive falling through a skyline.
Well, it makes it even worse. He only survived 6 years now because he was apparently the most invincible one, and he still died.
Yeah,
can't do anything against Destiny.
And my favorite part, but again, this is something Diamanda Hagen pointed out, is that the lightning is so powerful. It explodes behind him, but when it hits him, it doesn't like affect his clothes.
Of course not.
He gives his powers to his clothes. That's how like the Hulk works.
It's a PG show, guys. Please.
Yeah, some people just want to see some David ass.
Except for in the last finale where he's allowed to be naked.
I really like an aspect of like David Tennant's Doctor being kind of like the one that kind of starts to like really express his emotions and feel something after like the Time War ended. But like they could have done that so much better than they did with the regeneration scene here.
If they'd actually done a proper follow through of Waters of Mars, this could have been a great final story, but that's not what we got.
Yeah, because like he started out as this like war PTSD survivor, and then he kind of eventually like reopens up emotionally, and then we could have had that point where he hits like that breaking point, and then he kind of turns into 11 after that, the kind of like jaded child or man-child, I guess. And then from there we get the Day of the Doctor. Not undoes it necessarily, but kind of shifts it into a new kind of character. But like they completely dropped the ball here. We need to remember they dropped the ball here so hard into a black hole.
At least David Tennant does get one last episode
with the same last line.
Yeah,
he always says that.
People are really pissed off with that. I thought it was funny.
Yes, it was so.
Yeah, I don't understand that. I guess it was like some sort of like. It seemed to be a legitimate hostile reaction to that scene online.
Part of me not finding it funny is that I hate this episode and that final line. So I guess I'm a biased party. So.
This is super offensive, not because I care about you, but because I hate you.
It's funny. I used to have the same reaction. Like, you know, Vampires of Venice. I really hate that episode.
Yeah.
And for some reason...
How did we mention that episode twice in this podcast?
It's like, yeah, I don't know. I thought that episode was one of the most boring episodes of all time. For some reason, Moffat loves it. And he kept referencing it like about in every episode, like when the Doctor was talking about like, oh yeah, we had like such great adventures, you know, vampires. And I was just like,
sexy fish vampires, dude.
Rubbish.
It's not the worst, but it's just very mediocre. And also Mr. TARDIS apparently thinks it's a masterpiece as well. So there you go.
9 out of 10.
We're just going to leave Rob here, and he's going to continue the podcast
forever.
And always remember, British prime ministers have cults behind them. And the president of the United States can solve the world's economy with a speech.
I think it's like backwards now. Honestly, like America has the cult and UK is trying to fix it and failing.
Anyway, I'm looking forward to talking about 11th Hour because this was my first episode of Doctor Who. So
I wish that was my
should
first
be
episode
fun.
of Doctor Who.
It's a much better episode.
This was mine. The horror nightmare show.
I didn't start watching the show until like series 6 was over and series 7 was just about to start. And my friends begged me to watch it. And I was like, look, you know who I am. If I watch this and I get into it, I will obsessively look into its 50+ year history. Basically just be the most annoying prick you will ever see about it. I watched the episodes because my friends no longer watch the show, I might add. I will talk to you guys whenever we're talking about 11th Hour.
Okay, see ya.
See ya, guys.